Alright everybody, hello, welcome to episode number, wrong one, 29. My god, 29 already. We're gonna have a fun episode for you tonight. My name is Adam K.A.K. Bay, and I'll be your host this evening. We are joined by Reniat of Whatever We're Awesome, and UltimateZeus of Inner Sanctum to talk all about Blood Death Knights. We have one more tanking class after this, which I think it runs around really well to have them last because of the situation with these last two tanks in the repertoire here. But enough about that nonsense. Joining us again, and we don't know if she's here or not next week, we'll get into that more later. Beloved co-host of FinalBossTV, NFL. Hi, Anna.
Hey, no, I'm definitely not here next week. My phone beeped while you were making sound effects.
Yes, I was making sound effects, yes.
Yes, I'm going skiing, and I have never been skiing before, so it's going to be probably a little bit messy, and I'm probably just going to spend most of my time, like, on my ass in the snow, complaining about how cold it is. I'm just going to go inside to where the fire is and drink hot chocolate with lots of Baileys in it.
Are you going to be tweeting pictures of you at the slopes?
Yes, I will.
So let's bring that up real quick. If you guys want to see Anna's skiing adventure, her Twitter is right there on the screen right now. Anna Field.
I'm like really into Instagram now. I actually just started using Instagram when I went to BlizzCon. Was the very first time I used it. So I Instagram photos all the time. So watch my Instagram and you'll see photos of me skiing.
There we go. Then of course, one of our two awesome guests tonight to talk about Blood DKs is going to be Mr. Reniat himself from Whatever We're Awesome. Hi Ren, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
This should be good.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. I was going to preface by saying that last night we were talking about the pre-show stuff, and we got a little sidetracked, so we got to keep you on point today.
Yes.
Right? We're going to keep you on track. And then, of course, from across the pond, UltimateZeus from Inner Sanctum, the first Blood Death Knight to kill 10 heroic Garrosh in the world.
Hey.
It's like a celebrity for the Blood Death Knight community right here. Awesome to have you here, sir.
Yep. It's going to be good.
Should be, as long as we can keep you two reeled in here, because we were what happened last night? We were like 45 minutes in. I was going over the show, and all of a sudden we're like another 45 minutes later. We're still talking about like Death Strike. It's like no, stop it, please. Yeah. But this should be a lot of fun. I actually, before Anna turns this around to you guys, actually no, Anna, you turn around to them, and I'll get the question ready because then I gotta ask this question first off.
Man, we're organized this week. This is great.
Yeah.
So let's hear a little bit more from you guys about what you do on the internet and where people can find you and hear more about your tanking exploits. Reniat, where can we find you? Do you have a Twitter? Do you stream?
I do. I have a Twitter. It's @ReniatDK. You can find me there, as well as across various forums. I'm on MMOC a lot, as well as the Boundlet forums.
Okay.
So anywhere you can get me out of those places.
I have a soft spot in my heart for people who help others out on forums. I know a lot of people these days are like, oh, forums are lame, you know, MMOC is full of people who don't know what they're doing, and the official forums are trash. But, I mean, a lot of us learned a lot of what we do by looking at forums.
I started by learning on the forums, and so that's why I kind of went back when I was able to help people there. So
excellent. Well, we'll look out for you there. And, Ulti, where can we find you? Where can we find more about what we do?
The best place is our guild website. If you want to get in contact with me. I look around the MMO forums a little bit, or MMO Champion rather, and then I lurk a bit in the Acherus chat.
Oh, I see, the DK chat, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely go into that later. There's a spot for that in the middle of the show where basically all the Death Knights of any spec or place can all go hang out right there, which is a great little put. Did Magdalena? He didn't put it together though, correct? Like who built Acherus and Son of the Lich?
I don't remember his name.
I don't remember.
I joined Acherus recently.
Yeah.
Somebody else built it, I think, but Magdalena does a lot of the work with maintaining it and marketing it basically and exposing it to the world. So if he did start it, he's probably going to start yelling at me right now. But I'm pretty sure somebody else started it, and Magdalena just works really hard on it.
Yeah, I was going to. He helped us a lot with all the show notes. He wrote up 2 huge post on Son of a Lich about the state of DKs in Mists of Pandaria, one of them being really kind of focused on blood, and it really helped me put together these show notes because I don't know about all these classes. I'm an enhancement shaman with like a little bit of paladin on the side. So when I go through all these notes to figure out what the heck is going on, I'm like, oh really? So that was good, a lot of help. It was good having him on the show. But now, I have a question real quick, because we're talking about Acherus and IRC and everything. This came in from Bloody on EU Agra, and it's to Reniat. Why do people call you Shakira in Acherus IRC?
Okay.
And I'll preface this again by saying that Magdalena told me to ask this, and it was also brought in on the email, so I might as well. Right?
Wow, giving in to pressure, Bay.
Hey,
what kind of a show is this?
I give the people what they want.
How much WoW golds did they give you?
None, actually. Should I have asked for? Damn it.
You should have asked for WoW gold.
We learned about that with Elvine. You gotta get whatever we can. You and I are poor. All right, so Ren, what do you got here?
Okay, so for some reason I started like just becoming different various names. Like I once made a theory crafting post on a forum on Icy Veins. Someone was not sure why a talent was used over another talent. So in the process of explaining it, I made up this fairy tale where instead of Reniat, it was Sveniat. And so that kind of started this weird naming convention. And then Sveniat, at one time I just called myself Febreze. I don't know why. I don't remember why. No context at all.
Febreze, huh? Okay.
Right, and then you combine those, it's Febreziat. And then for some reason, Shekzir, the Grand Empress Shekzir got in there, so it's Grand Empress Shekzir, I don't remember. Some stupid long name. Shekzvereziat or something like that, and then turned into Shakira. It's not funny, it's not witty, it's blame Mag. That's all I have to say.
Oh, you're gonna shots fired.
That sounds fine to me.
That's pretty good. It just brought up, like, that's the first time we've had like another question about someone else's like other nickname. And the Acherus community, the people that are over there on Son of a Lich, you guys, you have a pretty popular chat, right? Like, how many people are there all the time? It's just really cool how you guys have this other community, and not every class has that, so it's pretty neat. And you're just known by Shakira in that. That's fine.
He's Reniat by day, Shakira by night.
There you go. Is that what it is? Oh, leading that double life. All right, that's fine. So to bring this up to not talking about silly nicknames real quick, I wanted to go over how, and I said this in our pre-show, and you guys were like, I haven't heard it called that in forever. So you guys play Death Knight, Blood specifically, the tanking spec, which didn't used to be specifically the tanking spec, but you are the hero class in World of Warcraft. So when did you start playing the hero class in World of Warcraft, Ulti? How long have you been playing?
I started playing in Wrath, and then I was a Fury Warrior, and then basically near the end of Dragon Soul, our guild wanted to push hardcore. However, both our tanks were extremely bad.
Oh, but you...
And
shots fired.
Yeah, and basically I ended up re-rolling to Blood DK. They're pretty overpowered in Dragon Soul. And then that guild disbanded maybe about 2 weeks in because there were a lot of bad people in there.
Oh, God.
And I joined IS and been there since MOP. Played the Blood DK all the way through.
You've been with IS the entire expansion then?
Yeah.
Well, very nice.
Very nice.
What about you, Reniat?
I started playing the Brand of Wrath super casually. I started raiding in Firelands, and then in Dragon Soul I decided I wanted to get a normal boss, like a normal final boss, down before the end of the tier.
Oh, that's
so I started getting serious about it. I basically played a Death Knight for the entire time I took the game remotely, like not anything beyond questing. I was running a Death Knight, basically. I don't know how I picked it back then, because I didn't have any knowledge of the game, so it was kind of an arbitrary decision, and I'm just glad I stuck with it, because having now played all the different tanking classes at 90, I'm definitely glad I picked this one. So,
So you do have experience on all the other tanking classes? And
I do. My goal, since we have so much time before the world is Draenor at this point, I'm trying to get Proving Ground 30 on all tanking classes, all my alts. So I've got Warrior and obviously my DK was done immediately, and then I went like to level 29 on my Monk, so I need to go back in and do that.
Oh,
and I leveled up a but those two are already 90. I had to level up a paladin and druid, but
Interesting. That's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. How many ultimate waves have you done? Have you done the unlimited waves? Endless, I guess you should say. Have you
well,
done
that's the way to get gold. Sorry, I meant the title, not the gold. I meant the Proving Grounds title.
Okay.
So 30 waves on all my alts.
That's what I was confused there. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I got the bronze, silver, gold on my shaman, then I was like, you know what? Let me try to go endless. I don't know if you've tried to go endless at all yet, Anna, but unless you are like perfect and you have great timing on all your procs for a melee, at least for a DPS, I got to like 17 and I was like, oh, I'm terrible. I'm bad.
I haven't done a whole lot of Proving Grounds since PTR. I really heavily tested them on PTR to give feedback about how they were going on tank and on DPS. But I've got really lazy about them on live. I think I got the golds and then I was like, I'm done. I'm actually more interested in doing it on my alts, which is why it's so interesting to hear that you wanted to do Proving Grounds 30 on all of your tanking classes, and I feel like that's very similar to what I want to use Proving Grounds for. Not really just prove stuff on my main, but really make sure that I have a thorough understanding of how my alts work, which is, I think that's really fun to learn in another class.
Yeah, that's an interesting side effect for Proving Grounds with, like, I guess higher end raiders, people that have multiple classes and stuff, is if you can see that. I mean, Proving Grounds are for what they are, but if you can get 30 endless or more on like multiple different roles, then that definitely says something about yourself. How about you? Have you done Proving Grounds? Ulti, have you done any of them?
I did them in PTR and then got gold and then did the endless as well. But then basically I got gold at the moment and then I went into endless and then I used the glider to jump a little bit further. DC'd and then got a bit angry and just haven't attempted it since.
Oh, fair enough.
I've definitely had those experiences where you spend a lot of time on something and then you like DC or the pull goes bad and you're like, ugh, I don't want to go through all that time again. Especially because in Endless you can't restart after a certain number of waves. I think they said they were going to add that at some point, maybe for next expansion, but right now you have to do all of the waves all over again. It's very frustrating.
No, absolutely. I haven't been back to really dig into them yet. And actually, not to put them on the spot, but in a little sub game that is someone didn't know, Brutal, our buddy who's been on the show before, he actually didn't know or has done any challenge modes yet. So I don't know how you don't know about those things from like a high-end perspective. Challenge modes are awesome.
How do you not know about challenge modes?
I have no idea.
Has he been living under a rock?
I don't know.
That takes effort.
He has to live under the rock to groom the beard in darkness because
Poor
it's
Brutal. We'll have to take him on challenge modes.
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah. So then, I wanted to know, we're talking about all this different special side stuff. Do you guys still feel special playing the Blood DK? I mean, Reniat said that you would prefer it over any other class. What was it?
I like the phrasing of that question.
Yeah.
Do you still feel special, or are you just like everybody else?
Yeah, because now everyone, Reniat said it, like, Monk's the new shiny, everyone plays a Brewmaster now. But like, when Blood DK came out, when DK came out first, everyone was like, oh, it's amazing! But now it's just kind of like, I mean, you guys have a main tank Blood Death Knight, Anna, but we've never had one in Chris.
Class with active mitigation, and that was ridiculously impressive to watch. If you were in a guild that used a blood, obviously you two were the blood DKs in those guilds, but if you were in a guild with a blood DK in Cataclysm, watching a class use active mitigation was very impressive. So I guess that is a legit question. Do you feel any less special now that everybody else has toys?
Ulti, how about you first?
I'd say special in a bad way.
Oh,
you look around and you're just like surrounded by monks and paladins and warriors, and you're like, oh my god, where's all the other DKs? But yeah, I mean,
I'm kind
not
of
really. Everyone's about the same. Yeah,
I think
tank's a tank.
We're still special in that we'll get plenty into this. Get ready to rein me in, babe. But we'll get plenty of this in the Death Strike topic. But we are still the only active mitigation tank who has a reactive mechanic structure with Death Strike versus Shield Block, which is Shield Block, Shuffle, Savage Defense, Shielded Righteous, which are all proactive in front of the damage as opposed to exactly proactive. So in that sense, we're still special. I don't really think it's a problem that we're not as well represented at like high end content. I mean, there are not as many of us versus say paladins. I mean, there's pretty much one paladin per guild right now.
that's always been the case. I mean, that's not unique to MoB.
right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to do with people like their class. I mean, Sko is going to play a warrior. Like Absalom's going to play a prop pally. Yeah, I said it right. Trekkies going to play a paladin. They stick with their classes. So regardless of how the balance changes, there's always going to be certain people who play their class regardless. So it's kind of hard to get an assessment of the class representation based on just the top tanks, because it's always going to be a little skewed because of stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the only time we get any real big, like, I guess, numbers from those top guilds is when stuff happens, like Heroic Week with like Nefarian back in the day when they had 11 boomkins or something stupid at the time. Like those stacked stuff, and you find out like, oh, okay. But like tank stuff, you can never find that. Have you ever like seen a guild that's killed it with like 2 of one tank or something because of some mechanic? Yeah, I don't think that's a thing.
You switch tank classes all the time because of some mechanic. I mean,
well, yeah,
that's true.
That's why we brought up in the show again too, like you were talking about how, and that was the thing about this show, is trying to find blood DKs that were comfortable being in front of the camera like this and being on the show like this, but also finding ones that were like well connected and well into the community and like know their stuff. There are other ones out there. Chat room talked about a couple earlier that we would have liked to have on, but they didn't. You know, they declined. But some of the big prolific blood DKs like Rignaros switched to Monk because they were just ridiculously good on Raden and Lei Shen. So, and then he never went back. So
I think the switch to Lei Shen, as far as I know it, the Raden thing is different, but Lei Shen specifically was just a damage output thing. Like, I'm not, I'll say that we are, I don't think it's a problem that the DK is underrepresented in the numbers point of view, but the fact that we don't do the same damage output right now is a problem. Like, that's not just, like, not having as many at the high end is different than being able to perform at the same level damage output wise. So the switch to Lei Shen, as I understand it, was a damage issue, because the early Lei Shen progression was all about getting the damage that you needed. And the reason Method beat Blood Legion, or one of the reasons, was that they had a strat that maximized damage at the cost of a little stability in terms of strat. And they pulled it off, and it gave them the win because they were able to put the damage out. Whereas Blood Legion used a bit of a safer strat, did not do quite as much damage, and they were second because of it. And it's just because it had a ridiculous, amazingly tuned, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but a very, very high DPS check. So the damage that a Monk brought relative to DK was completely justified for a where I'm in the same position, I would have switched too. Though I like to think I would have come back afterwards, but you can't really say. It's only speculation.
The Monk taunt as well lowered the damage quite a lot when you're moving Lei Shen across the platforms. But I mean, I did almost every boss as a DK. I swapped on Thok to a Paladin, since the double bop and the aura mastery was amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we did that with 3 paladins in a 10-man group. So
holy crap, that's right. You were 10 man.
Wow. Oh, that's right. I was sitting there thinking, like, man, we had 3 paladins. How did you not have 3 paladins? No, of course.
But Raden can't even tank it as a DK. So I mean, I just sat out on that fight. So killed it like 6 weeks while the other tank was boosting me. So.
Yeah. Which I don't know if that is I wonder if that is a design implementation that Blizzard wants, that not every tank is perfect for every encounter, but that also...
No, the intention with Raden is that the DK was good for the phase that everyone skips.
Oh, no!
That is the reason why. Raden was not...
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really take Raden as an example, because the phase everyone skips, a DK tank would have been excellent for that phase. And that's the reason why it was okay for DKs to be broken and not working on the phase that we all do. So our DK went Frost and tanked the ads on that fight, so he didn't sit out, but I can completely understand how you would have.
Yeah, the second phase, we would have probably been the best tanks that you could have brought for it. But yeah, I'm quite surprised Blizzard didn't actually go in and fix something with our Death Strike to give us a buff that made us immune to Fatal Strike. But whatever.
Yeah. They could have easily fixed it without changing balance, but
yeah,
they didn't.
Exactly.
Oh well. I tweeted Ian Hazakostas about it, the Watcher, dev designer, or pen designer about it. He said he doesn't think they're going to use that moving forward, at least not near as much. So it may not be a problem moving forward. Here, I'll actually pull it up to get the exact.
Use what moving forward? Can you clarify?
That kind of like active mitigation, like it's a Boolean where you either have it or you don't, and if you don't, something other than the attack happens. So fatal strike, if you don't have it, take the damage, but you also die. or injection on paragons where you take the damage, but you also get spawn blood parasites,
So
not blood parasites, sugar parasites.
Like the sheer mechanic.
The week I had to tank one of the weeks that our warrior was out, and I remember being like, these mechanics where you have to have active mitigation up are just completely new to me because I hadn't tanked in forever. Yeah,
that sounds like, I mean, that's back in the day. I mean, old fogies like me in Burning Crusade with Illidan, you had to have a warrior tank because you had to shield block sheer or you died. And if you didn't have it, you couldn't Druid tank it, and you couldn't Paladin tank it because you use half your HP, and then he just kills you on the next swing. So it seems like they've had it in small portions, but if they do move away from that model, I think it'll really put all the tanks better on a more even footing, and then you bring, again, the player, not the class, which is their argument they've had for a long time, which hasn't really happened. So
I have a question for you guys. Both of y'all were on your DKs in Firelands, correct? From your history?
Only as an alt, but yeah.
I was, but I was not clearing normal content at the time. Remember, I said yes, and I was serious.
That's
so.
right. Because I was going to ask if y'all had DK tanked Rag. Because Rag was another one of the fights that DK tanks were not so good on. They legendarily went splat on that fight.
Yeah.
So, but y'all, I suppose if y'all didn't have that experience on a DK main, then never mind.
I mean, I only tanked it in 5-3, so Dragon Soul, where we sort of outgeared it. But I mean, I think it was fine as long as you used your cooldowns properly, and you were pretty good in the last phase as well with AMS. You could just drag the boss out and not get that many stacks.
Yeah, our DK did it. I just remember being told at the time that we did it. We were not in like the top 10, but I think we did it in the 30s or 40s. US, and at the time that we did it, we were told like, oh, you can't use a DK tank. DK tanks are broken on that fight. We were like, yeah, watch us. And it was fine. So, but at the time in Firelands, Rag was one of the fights that people said that DK tanks couldn't do as well. And it's funny how there's this dichotomy between the fights that you guys are incredibly overpowered on, or the fights where y'all's mitigation is just not quite as good.
Yeah, there are some fights that we just plain suck at, and that's where alts come in at the top tier. Like, if you tried to do Garagel 25 heroic on the first week, you just wouldn't, like, you'd instantly kill your dolls, and yeah, that wasn't good. So you either sat or you played an alt.
Yep,
Okay.
I hate that fight.
Well, I guess that kind of brings us into yeah. So we'll go into the next little topic here, which I was going to talk about a little bit more about the revamp, going from Cataclysm, the changes you had, the balance you had, because you came in Wrath, and they fixed you guys or updated stuff in Cataclysm, and then now versus the Mist update. Magdalena said that there was a lot of like contention about how this update was sort of like the wrong direction for you guys. It wasn't as good as the Cataclysm one. And like I said earlier, getting guests on this show was difficult because of the state of Blood DK in Mist. So just how did it feel for you guys? What was the thought going in from Cataclysm into Mists when you guys really went to your, we were on your Blood DK the whole time? Ulti, what do you think?
Well, in the transition, they didn't actually change that much, but the problem was they changed all the other tanks. So
yes,
they became enormously overpowered because their mitigation is they have a percentage-based mitigation as part of it, or an absorb or something like that, where we just have, you absorb this amount. So if you get hit like a truck, you can't percentage mitigate it, where you just have to absorb it or take the full hit as well. So if that full hit is bigger than your HP, then you're not going to survive that well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand what that means. I mean, you guys have it. It seems like just like your mechanic with Death Strike, which we'll get into a little bit here, and then into the Blood Shield that you get from it, really scales better the later you get into a tier. And at first, since you don't have a percentage-based mitigation, that's just a really hard problem. Ren, what do you guys think that happened with you guys going into Mists too?
Granted, I wasn't at the level I am now at the time. I kind of really started getting serious in MOP, like the first tier. That said, I think the thing that, like, there is a lot of issues with the change, mainly that, like you said, there wasn't a whole lot of change compared to other tanks. We didn't get near as much cool, shiny new stuff as the tanks did, and we just paled in comparison. But also, like, well, I'm sure we'll talk about later, the talent choices are not very good. There's a lot of places where
Talents are so weird.
yeah, our talents are not fantastic. But there is one thing I like to say that like is really, really good, that change between Kata and Mop. And that is something also that we'll talk about later, is the tier 75 talent choices. The fact that we were able to get off of Runic Empowerment as our primary rune regen system from Cataclysm into the Blood Tap Runic Corruption style that we have now as options is pretty fantastic for Death Strike timing. That makes Death Strike timing as it is today possible and improves the class a lot. Like, not on paper, but the arbitrary, like, or not arbitrary, but abstract ideas behind Death Strike that makes us able to do just as good as other tanks now is because we can do things more flexibly because we don't have to rely on Runic Empowerment for our rune return. So that is one positive change going into MOP that happened in Cataclysm. I think you can't really ignore that one.
Sure.
So.
And I guess it's good that Ulti clarified for me, because I didn't mean that like the changes to you, but your other 4 tanking classes, because they were supposed to take the active model that was based on you guys going into Mists, and that's when it was like it flipped the horse upside down, basically, when you guys were now like on the back foot. You're like, oh, what's going on now? That was our stuff. So yeah, I don't and then that makes me wonder now, how many like top tier blood DKs are out there? I mean, do you have a good representation of them in Acherus, or I mean, how many of you are there that are like blood and not Unholy or Frost?
As far as like high end, I think there are like 5 or 6. Like if you're looking at like the front page, at least in 25 man, I don't actually follow 10 man that closely.
Sure.
Saying that as I don't do 10 man. But for 25 man specifically, if you look at like front page WoW progress, I think there's only about 5 or 6 across the 20 guilds, which is really low compared to the other classes, considering that there are 40 tank positions inside of that 20 guilds, since there's 2 per. So
that's a bit of a number. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it goes back to like what I was saying earlier about how I don't feel like the number is accurate representation of how good we are. Like, and not like good like in a skill wise, but good like a stability wise. Like, we're not a really popular class, but that doesn't mean we're completely non-viable or completely non-optimal. Like, the only reason I would say we are not the best tank right now, and we'll get more into this later, but is the damage output. If damage output were equal across all tanks right now, I would have no issues with Blood Decay. With the exception of like the talent options, but that's not a performance issue. That's just a, how fun the class is to play issue.
And that's a statistic. I want to turn that back to Anna. That's kind of like how like the rating top tier community like frowns upon enhancement shamans and ret paladins, because like we're just not as good as rogues, or we're not as good as feral druids, or we're like all this other crap. But like that doesn't mean we're not good. So
it doesn't mean that you can't clear all of the content in the game with those classes. It's just
even at a competitive pace too. I mean, World 16
pace.
isn't World 1, but it's not nothing either.
Yeah, exactly. You can clear all of the content in the game. If you're going for World Firsts, then obviously you're going to have to stack your rate a little bit. But there's nothing that says all classes can't clear all of the content that there is. But yeah, the damage output thing, it's a real problem, and I feel like it makes your class less fun to play if you feel like you're putting out less damage. And you could be putting out more just by swapping to another class that's in the same role. And I know
Warriors.
And I know, I know that we've everybody here in this show has been in that situation because Bae plays an enhancement shaman and because I play a ret paladin. So we've been there. Although I was prot paladin before I was ret, so I had the experience of being the chosen tank for a long time. Prot paladins have kind of never been bad. So sorry.
Definitely
not
been
sorry.
bad.
Yeah.
So now that wasn't. Oh, what, Anna?
Go ahead, Bae.
I was gonna say that brings us to. I was gonna interject this when you were ranting about it earlier, but I wanted to make sure that number came out there for blood decays. But now, so how active is blood decay active mitigation? This is the Death Strike topic. Now, I'm gonna watch the time on this really closely because we have a lot more to get to, and I don't want to take up the whole show on this, but. I think because originally you guys were the only class that had sort of that active model that Blizzard referred to, and they used that as a baseline for Guardians, Prots, and now I guess Monks sort of, even though Monk is super passive, to be honest. They have like one thing that's active, so whatever. Go watch the Monk episode if you want to know about Monks and Brewmasters. But, so, just how active is your active DK model? So, Ulti, I'll start with you.
All right. It's very active. I mean, like, you need to be paying attention to the last 5 seconds of your damage intake, and then you need to predict what's coming in the future as well, and like how many runes you've got, how long's left until you get more runes, and 101 different things, and then you need to decide if that's when you want to death strike or if you want to sit on it, maybe pop a cooldown or something like that. So yeah, it's probably the most active tank compared to I can keep shuffle up.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that you have to one of the aspects of high level Blood DK tanking is that you have to build up that shield before you need to react to the damage. So it's not just that you're reacting to damage that comes in; it's that you've spent a lot of time planning for that death strike that you're going to do.
It depends on the damage you're taking. I mean, you're going to have to, like, for example, Nazgrim, execute a big timeable attack. You're going to have to go from his physical swings where you're going to use reactive things, since you can't predict the size of his physical swing, since it's just it's a range. You have to go from doing reactive death striking around his normal physical attacks to getting ready to be able to put up a big shield for the execute and then go back into reactive, which involves making sure that you put it up soon enough that it's there, but not soon enough that you lose some of your shield from the melee hits that still have to have between that and execute. Execute is nice because he has a cast time on it, so he doesn't actually hit you before, but other similar mechanics don't always have that nicety. So yeah, it is definitely about watching like your active, or watching your damage flow. You have to know what you're taking. Like, what is a large burst? What is a small burst? What is a medium burst? If it's a medium burst, what do I do? And that's what he was saying with like 101 different things you have to keep track of. Like, if you know a high range of a boss's burst, you know whether or not you need to death strike after that or not. But if it's a medium-sized burst, it's not always clear, and that's when you have to go through like these different levels of, okay, if it's not clear about the size, what about my runes? What do those look like? When was the last time I did it? Can I make a pattern out of this? What are my healers doing? Are they moving? Is there some raid damage going on that means that they might not be able to focus me as heavily? Like, all these kind of things go into each and every death strike. The only death strikes you don't have to do that for are death strikes that are what I call throughput death strikes, which is just when we have our rune regen enough that we get our other runes back are about to get them back before we had to have death strike. And those, depending on the damage intake, don't always happen. So for the most part, every death strike has to be intelligently timed and really focused on, and that's to get the same level of benefit for other tanks. You have to do all that for every death strike to get the same performance as a warrior pushing shield block once, or a monk being a monk for. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, when you're pushing shield block, or I guess the equivalent for me would be Shield of the Righteous, you have to know when that damage is coming. A lot of times that depends on your knowledge of things like the boss's swing time, to time the Shield of the Righteouses. So just because we do it before and you guys do it afterwards, I don't know if I would say that ours is stupider than yours is.
No, I'm not trying to say it's completely passive, but in comparison.
In comparison,
there's a lot less,
that's fair.
We brought it up yesterday to go about it way is that it's with the haste build with high-end prot paladins, you can almost just spam Shield of the Righteous and have it up 80% of the time, 70-80% of the time, whereas like you can only death strike so many times a minute because of the way that the rune regeneration works. So that's a difference in, like, if you just like throw off a death strike 2 or here and then you get crushed in the face, you don't have runes up, then you're like, what do I do?
Now what?
Yeah, then you're
sacrifice my pet.
You're kind of in a hole.
So, but then I guess in that way, Magdalena wanted us to bring up a lot of things. I want to bring up tons of things, but then when I was reading over this again, Will of the Necropolis, which is your pseudo cheat death, and I guess it's Ardent Defender, but not on not a cooldown. It's just always there. What's your thoughts on Will of the Necropolis? Because I guess there's a little bit of contention about this silly thing.
The problem with Will of the Necropolis is it's leapfroggable, which basically means, if that's a word, it is now. It procs whenever we go below 35% health. It means we get a free rune tap, whether or not we had it on cooldown or not, which is 10% health. The problem with this is, one, rune tap isn't incredibly powerful because it's not based on vengeance. It's just a flat 10%. So unlike every other mechanic in other tanks, it doesn't scale with vengeance. So when you're getting trucked for 80% of your health, like you were on End of Paragons for 25 heroic.
What the heck is 10%?
Yeah, it's not a huge thing. And so that combined with the fact that it's leapfroggable, meaning if you go from 40% to 0%, you missed your window for Will in the Necropolis. It doesn't do you any good. Whereas if what Magdalena was talking about with that was he wanted it to be so that if you would have procced it and it would have saved you to have the effect in there.
Correct.
So like if it goes from 40 and then below 30, it puts that in place. Anyway, that's what leapfroggable means. It means you can go completely over it and not get the benefit from it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say that that's so much a design problem with the spell as much as it is the problem is indicative of the fact that burst damage is what encounters are all about these days.
Yeah.
So it's much more likely to go from 40% to 0.
At the same time, though,
supposed to mitigate.
At the same time, like the way that DK works, if you do it right and if the death strike timing happens, the burst is manageable. To the point where it's not like the burst makes us bad. It's so that we have to... The thing is, we have to deal with the burst. That's our gameplay, is dealing with that burst. So it's not so much that the burst is there being a problem, so much as... Like, because if the burst isn't there, the DK wouldn't be fun to play. Like, that's the whole point of the class, is to time Death Strike to remove the threat of the burst. That's the gameplay. That's the engaging part of the gameplay for Blood Death Knights. So I'm not... I'd rather have Will and Necropolis be crappy than to remove the kind of the bursty side of it, because dealing with that is how the class is intended to be played and makes it fun and engaging.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, so Ulti, I'm going to bring that back around to you now, because you also can take Purgatory, which is one of your talents that literally just makes you not die. So how does
Purgatory?
How does well yeah, so
poor man's ardent defender is what it is.
Pretty much. How does Purgatory work with Will and the Necropolis, or how does
Magdalena's
Purgatory work?
favorite talent.
Yeah,
well,
seriously.
What sometimes happens if you like sort of panic a little bit, so you drop into Purgatory and you proc Will, so you get a free rune strike and you rune strike, and then you just bumped up 10%. So you just get destroyed again, and because you've already proc Purgatory, you are just going to die. So you sort of got to shift out of the thing of auto pressing it when it's when it procs. But yeah, I mean it's fine with Purgatory, because as long as you get a massive heal like Void Shift or Death Pact or Lay on Hands or whatever, it's fine. I personally don't think it's that broken. I actually like how it is now.
Okay.
I don't think it needs to be changed. It
looks like to me, though, like going over like how blood DKs are very much interactive with the self-healing and stuff. Like if you ever went into Purgatory and Will the Necropolis procs, would you vamp blood and then also rune tap and death pact your pet at the same time, like to really heal yourself? Because if you just rune tap, it's only what 10%, 15% with the vamp blood up or whatever it is. So would you really want to combine all of that to not be at 1 HP?
It depends what your how deep you're into Purgatory. So if you just got hit for 1 million and you're 1 million into Purgatory, you need to vamp blood in the Death Pact. And then hope you get some heals from healers. What you shouldn't do is, if Purgatory procs, you shouldn't rune tap, because you're 90% going to die anyway, because you just heal yourself out of Purgatory, which is your 3-second safe zone. And you've healed yourself, 100k, like 5k or something. So you just fall over again, and it's
Now, devil's advocating this. Oh, what, Reniat?
I was gonna say, I would make the argument that depending on how you went into Purgatory, you probably should have had Vampiric Blood up before you went into Purgatory.
Oh, okay. See, that's a thing.
I mean, that's kind of like goes back into like handling the burst. I mean, you have Death Strike timing, you have cooldown management, including externals. Like the gameplay is avoiding that Purgatory proc, not dealing with it afterwards. And so if you're getting into Purgatory, either something went wrong, or you should have had a cooldown up that you didn't have. So I mean, it's kind of an odd question, because if you had Vampiric Blood and you were taking levels of damage that could have put you to Purgatory, you probably should have Vampiric Blood up ahead of time. But
now, how does that work with the cape proc? Would they both proc at the same time, and you basically lose one of them, or?
If you were to take a killing blow, the cloak procs first, and then if you take another killing blow, you would then drop into Purgatory.
Which is nice. It wasn't always that way. They originally had it so they proc at the same time, which was awful. But they fixed that pretty quickly.
That's what I was wondering, if they fixed it or not, because that sounds like you would you would waste it. Granted, I know I hear all the time. I don't know if you guys hear it too, or you say it, or Ann and I hear it, but like we hear all the time, like cloak didn't proc, I'm dead. Awesome, you know, like all the time. So
I've never been overkilled for my entire HP, so I've never had the cloak not proc when it should have.
Okay, all right, that's fine. And then I guess I'll keep this on track here and push it along to Q&A that came in from Prize on US Airy Peak. And then he asked, what is the best way to deal with unexpected spike damage, magic or physical? So, I'll go with ulti first. Is there any way you deal with magic? I'll do you magic and I'll give physical to Reniat, or if about the same, I don't know.
Well, I guess if you... I don't really think that is that much unexpected damage. Like, you should have a decent grasp on how much damage you're taking from a boss.
Sure.
And then, you know, maybe if the tank dies or whatever, then you can have sort of unexpected damage. So, yeah, you just gotta use a cooldown, really. I mean, you should always have something available to do, as well as a death strike sitting in your hand ready to, like, smash out. If it's magic, then you can just AMS it, and it's all good.
Well, so I think, going back to what Reniat said first, is that, so you guys have 4 cooldowns externally, and then Death Strike, right? If I'm not missing this. Icebound Fortitude, Death Pact, Vamp Blood, and Bone Shield, right?
We also have DRW and Army, which works.
Yeah.
Oh, so you have 6. And that, I think, brings me back around to the fact that those you have to have planned ahead of time, dealing into how your active mitigation model works.
Yes.
So you shouldn't ever go oh crap, what just hit me? You should know it's going to hit you, and then you react either right before it happens or right after it happens. That's the whole point of your class.
Yeah. If you think you'll get if you're taking unexpected damage, it's because you don't have a firm grasp on how much damage you should be taking, and that is why Death Knights spike a lot. If you're spiking, it's because you're not expecting the damage, and you obviously can't account for that, but you need to be able to. Yeah. Also, I'm a dwarf, so I have stone form as well.
Oh god, 7!
The master race.
The master race, okay. Yeah, Trekkie just says it in chat, actually. How do you deal with unexpected damage? If you know it's incoming, it's not unexpected then, is it?
Exactly.
That really feels like... It almost makes you feel like other tanks can just kind of on the fly deal with it, because if you take a huge hit as a prot warrior, you can just be like, oh, shield barrier, I'm okay now. 1.98 bajillion shield on me, no big deal. But you guys have to know a lot. There's a lot of road mapping, it seems like, with you guys.
We have to... Our health is more fragile. We take more damage, we spike harder, so we have to pay that much more attention to the damage coming at us. It's what it is. I'm not saying, it takes that much more effort, but it does take a noticeable more effort to keep track of the damage coming at you, I guess.
Yeah, that's what chat room comes up again. Yeah. Mysolar says, a DKs look like they spend a lot of their time focusing on playing effectively to stay alive, while he said paladins
have that on automatic.
Yeah, on automatic.
That's not exactly fair.
I don't know if that person has played a paladin, but
yeah.
It's cool. Paladins are easy.
Jeez. I mean, in some regards, I think Paladins and Guardian Druids just kind of DPS and tank just because they are DPSing. Same thing with monks. Mm-hmm. So, in Blood Death Knights, sure. Yeah, monks for sure. You Blackout Kick is part of your rotation. How hard is it to keep up shuffle, honestly, now?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So then, what do we have here next? Essential high end, taking damage, heal shield. I guess the only thing that I wanted to bring up was how does Vengeance going to change this in 6.0? Because we know about your damage being an issue right now, but Vengeance in 6.0, as we currently understand it, right, is that it's only going to affect mitigation, not DPS.
Yeah. So,
what do you guys think about Vengeance changes in 6.0 about your Death Strike mechanic in particular?
Well, I mean, Death Strike doesn't even scale to Vengeance. It scales on damage taken. So if if you're absorbing everything, then you're not going to get your Death Strike isn't affected. So I don't think that needs a change. I think Vengeance is going to be completely useless for a Blood DK because we just don't scale with it in our defensive abilities.
Yeah.
Moving forward, but when they do add Death Strike to Vengeance, I think it'll be a slight stability buff because we won't, like he was saying, right now it's not off Vengeance, it's off damage taken, which is similar but different. It's the same idea, but the difference is when we absorb something, we don't get that into our next death strike. Whereas if it's with vengeance, we do get that benefit. So it kind of makes all the death strikes more even in amount. Yeah. So which is a small buff depending on how it's tuned. I do want to make the point that it won't change how we death strike. We're still going to be death striking for like bursts. We're going to be minimizing the burst and spike damage. So we're going to make sure we have a death strike for a big burst so we can immediately recover and turn it into a lesser burst. And that the playstyle is not going to change. And I think that's going to be something that's going to have to be mentioned a lot in forums. That's why I want to say it now. When that change happens, it's not going to change how we play. It will just be a slight stability buff. It's going to make a little easier to make sure you have good chunk death strikes.
Okay. Yeah, it's like what Trekky's talking about it in chat right now, which it's so awesome we have these people to come in and talk to you guys about more of this stuff. Like, it's an extra show. If you're watching this on the VOD right now, you don't get the chat room. So why are you not watching it live?
Yeah, come watch it live with us. Yeah, seriously.
Goodness gracious. Because you get all this extra information that we can't always, like, pay attention to that we're doing the show because we have a roadmap to go through. But yeah, it's, smoothness equals survivability, so it looks like that's going to be a good change, though. You're both okay with that? Vengeance going to survivability, mitigation stuff only, and not just giving you ridiculous millions and millions of DPS.
I'm happy with it. It's definitely going to make tank DPS scale like sort of easier to balance. Like you won't have monks doing 1 million DPS and us sitting there with 250k and being like, God damn it!
Is it really that bad?
Like you won't have.
It's not that bad. That's just extremes. But I mean, it will make it a lot easier to balance, rather than having multiple tanks scaling differently with attack power, and then having different amounts of attack power per fight. So, yeah.
Okay.
And hopefully you won't have encounters anymore where it's like, hey, let's solo tank Maloriak and not split the cleave and just and make our tank do insane damage. I mean, because on one hand it's fun to be the tank doing very, very large numbers, but on the other hand, when you have such unbalanced situations, it becomes less fun for everybody when there are specific classes that can pull that kind of thing off. And then if you're not the person who can do that, then that's less fun. So I don't know. I'd like to see it more even for everyone. I also haven't met a tank yet who thinks that Vengeance as a damage increasing mechanic was really so much fun that they don't want to see it go away.
Yeah.
So every tank that I've talked to has been on the line, like somewhere between, maybe it was fun sometimes, but it's better for the game that it's being taken out, or it's awful and I'm glad they're taking it out. I mean, if you are a tank who thinks that Vengeance as a damage increasing mechanic was super fun and awesome and it's going to ruin your game to have it taken away, then tell me now, because I'd like to know who you people are.
Yeah, then play DPS.
Play DPS, like please. But seriously, if you are that person, then tell me after the show or tweet me or something, because I have yet to meet one. So.
I think obviously big numbers are fun, and I can't imagine that, like say for example our main tank Mass, who is the biggest hooer of Vengeance out there for a protection warrior, he does so much stupid damage. And the problem is though, is that Blizzard knows about this right now, and they have to kind of balance boss HP around that. Our tanks are going to do ungodly amounts of DPS, where sometimes they're almost worth 2 people, where that's not like a really good issue, and that's going to be addressed in Warlords. As far as we know, they're doing about 70%. They're gauging it that tanks are about 70% of a real DPS, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully that makes them still worth it, but doesn't make them worth 2 people, because that's a little awkward.
Yeah.
It'll be nice when it's fair for everyone again.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want tank damage to be like Burning Crusade level, where you didn't even appear on the damage meters and healers cannot DPS you, but it's a little crazy right now, let's be honest.
Yeah, I think it'd be fine if you could just do as much damage as a disc priest, then it would be okay.
Okay.
No, it's going to be about 75% of a DPS's output. That's what they've said.
That's good.
Hopefully.
That's good. So,
no giant well cup today. Sorry, I'm drinking coffee. I woke up about an hour before the show in response to chat.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, see? Coffee.
Coffee.
Yay. Okay.
It's like a whole, you got a French press there?
Yeah, I got a French press, man.
Yeah, pretty nice. So the next thing that I wanted to bring up before we go to the break was that your diseases do not really increase your strike damage in 6.0. Is that what I'm getting? So like, what is the point? It's just maybe 2 dots you put up and just kind of like, they're there.
Well, they're damage.
Yeah, that's what. But since your Vengeance won't give you damage, Like, they're just sort of, like, part of the class then? I mean, we'll talk about diseases more when we come back from the break, but just about the whole vengeance changes, though. Like, how do you guys feel about your diseases as a blood tank? Is it much notice? Because they don't do anything for you, really, do they?
Well, at the moment, they give you a decent damage increase on almost all your abilities, so... And, I mean, they're so easy to maintain. You outbreak on the pull, and then your Blood Brawl procs just keep them up, so...
Yep.
There's no maintenance to it. So, yeah, it won't really affect us, because if you're trying to... As a tank, you always still want to max your damage, so you'll still keep them up, because they're easy to maintain. So you're really losing nothing, but gaining... Even if it's 1k DPS... It's still 1k DPS.
Sure, no, absolutely. I mean, numbers would be different in the future here too, where your damage comes from. So, and then Ren, you had something on that too?
Sorry, I distracted with something in chat.
No, that's fine. That's totally okay.
Stop looking at that.
Chat is awesome. It's fine.
But yeah, like the damage we do, like the dots, it doesn't. Just like most classes that have like 1 or 2 dots, that isn't like super impactful to our gameplay or like priority system. I mean, it's kind of just there. It's kind of fun to place dots and spread them to like the entire like on a big AoE pull with dots is kind of fun. The only other interaction we have is with Dancing Rune Weapon, where we can place double dots on. Oh,
that's right. That's right.
Yes, because it copies our dots through Outbreak. So you can. It's really fun to place double dots on a target and then spread it with DRW Pestilence. So now you have 2 sets of diseases rolling on everything. It's kind of crazy. But other than that, there really isn't like a lot of gameplay with the diseases. So the strikes being off of the without them needing to have diseases to have their full damage isn't really a thing. Like, I mean, we have a glyph in the game right now that lets us do. I think it's Blood Boil. Doesn't take that into account, so it hits as if all your diseases were on, regardless of if they are or not damage wise.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just nah. Like, and we don't use it now. That's my point. Is we have it, we don't use it. So it's like making that baseline for that in Heartstrike is kind of just, it's whatever. I don't really see it as anything.
Fair enough. I mean, we have a little more talk on 6.0 and feature site stuff here in a little bit, but I'm going to take a quick moment and jibber jab to you folks real quick about some awesome communities that are maybe behind the scenes or you haven't heard of yet. I think you should go check out, because as the YouTube comments brought up last week, I apparently said they were awesome multiple times, so I will still continue to say that. The first one up, of course, if you want more WoW outside of your World of Warcraft, and if you want some healing corners here, Suni has been over on manaflask.com for, this is his 4th or 5th time. This one's all about Garrosh, breaking down intricate fights from a healer standpoint, and going through like phasing and positioning and giving away all of Method's elite strats from a healer perspective. So it's pretty cool. There's awesome little articles here. There's us. They've got their streams both in English and German. They've also got a VOD section over here on the side. And there's a ton of extra stuff on here. It's not just news posts. They have a couple different editorials they run on here. Obviously, the healing method with Suni has been a pretty big deal right now. They have different interviews they have to put up here now and then. So you guys should go check out manaflask.com when you have a moment. You know, bookmark that and go to it. And then, of course, we're talking about DKs. And this is where, if you are a DK of Unholy, Blood, or Frost, you want to go over to sonofalich.com. And that is where you will get the Arcers chat, where they have their own forums. And you can read, I think, yeah, here they are. The Part 1 and Part 2 by Magdalena, all about the criticisms for MOP DK, which I read through. And really well written. Nice links. Good little pictures and stuff. Really great things on this website. Lots and lots of great tier. It kind of, the big posts are sort of intermittent, but the chat is always there. And I guess both of you guys can attest to this. How often are you actually in Arcers chat, you two?
I pretty much am there all the time. Like, even if I'm not at the computer, my computer is on with Acherus on one of my windows. Mm-hmm. So I'm at least, always there, even if I'm not there. So if you like PM me in there, I'll get it at some point, assuming I don't disconnect between then and when I get back on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Same.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are always there. It's awesome that you guys have this always running live chat. It's really cool. It's very cool. And then, of course, another tanking class. If you guys need some more tanking stuff, we're going to be talking about Guardians here in the future, but the Fluid Druid is where you want to go. They've got feral guides. This website is all about their Fluid Druid forums right here. Hearthstone guide now, apparently. What is Ariel doing? This is so fun. But they break down guides and do posts all about Guardian Druids, in case you play that class. And all the general Druid info right here. They also do other stuff with not only Guardian-oriented stuff, but I mean, all 4 specs are there. That's where you want to go. They have their Team Waffle podcast on the side, which is a Druid podcast for Druids by Druids. So you can go check out fluiddruid.net as well. And then again, if you guys have missed previous episodes, the links are down below to our social media and to our YouTube page. Right now, Brutal tweeted about how they are the 10th or 7th most watched VOD on our channel. So then he was asking Coltrane to tweet it out a whole bunch, and a whole bunch of people did as well. But all of our videos are all up here. Both the after shows and the main shows are right here if you want to go see which classes we've done in the past, or watch an episode with a special guest like Affinity. We've got Nobble the Noble and Silver Latomi. Again, I got Brutal Static and Coltrane right here. We're almost done with all the main classes proper. But I'm, of course, mixing in community episodes here and there. But we have all the way back to going on 7 months ago now. And yeah, you can go subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go watch some of our past videos if you missed the live show or you have other people you want to show about the like guildies that haven't seen it. All right there. We also do show up on iTunes sometime during the week. It's just sort of whenever I update the RSS feed. And people have been asking to be on Stitcher now. So we're going to try to get to Stitcher and get that updated and stuff. It's a little different submission process, so we'll do that. And then if you got your donations, we got our donation stuff all mailed out just over a week ago now. So if you've gotten your wristbands or your t-shirts, tweet us a picture or Facebook us a picture of you with your new crew t-shirt. Those look awesome. I know Nobble posted his. Firius also posted his. So yeah, send those to us on Twitter. We love seeing what you guys have. And we'll go back to the show here. I think we are all set.
Yep.
Are you good, Anna? Are you all set back there? I don't know what.
I realized I left my oven on from making breakfast at, 3.
Oh, okay.
So I walked over there to warm my coffee up, and then I walked back and I sat down in my chair like, wait a second, there was a red light on there.
Yeah, let's not pull a Gary Gannon and burn down the studio mid-show, please. Thanks.
Yeah, BRB Bay, house is on fire.
House fire, yeah.
That was bad.
Yeah. So I want to jump into the part of the show after the commercial breaks are usually very much more math heavy. So I wanted to open up with, we just talked a little about your diseases, but now I want to talk about the current state of spreading them. And Magdalena was pretty adamant about this in his post about that. You have so many ways to do it, and it's just kind of like dumb. And you out-level some versions of it, and why are they still there? So is there too much redundancy? And is there any maintenance ever after the start of a fight to worry about them ever? And is that a good or a bad thing? I'll start with Reniat.
There really isn't a whole lot of, there is a lot of redundancy, but the problem is there's so much redundancy and there's always one, usual answer. So there's just it turns into a bunch of unused stuff. I've had Rolling Blood, or Roiling Blood.
Roiling, yeah.
I always see it as rolling, even though it's an I. I've had that in my talents for the entire expansion. I haven't switched from it since, because you don't need to. Because anything that Unholy Blight can do, Rolling Blood can do. So there's no reason. And then Unholy Blight has a cooldown and doesn't hit new targets that come into a fight that may or may not be intended to be adding to the fight at that moment. Whereas Rolling Blood, you can always spread your diseases to anything that comes in contact, just passively, automatically. Because you get Crimson Scourge procs automatically. And so you can get free blood boils regardless if you're doing single target, AoE, what have you. Yeah. So you're always going to be pumping out blood boils. You're always going to be spreading diseases. So anything that comes in, you're just naturally going to passively put stuff on it. It's super convenient. It's super easy. Unholy Blight just doesn't have that. You have to actually use it. It's an AoE, and it's 10 seconds and it's gone. So it's just, if you're looking at it on a per global cooldown basis, you have to spread it with Rolling Blood, whereas Unholy Blight, it puts everything on it by itself, but you're saving one blood rune, basically, to spread it, and that basically that impacts the entire rest of the fight for the next 1 minute or whatever, 1.5 minute between the Unholy Blight cooldowns. So it's just not worth it to ever really pick that. That's a very specific situations. And then the other option we have is Plague Leech for our talents to spread diseases. Yeah. Is and that could be so cool, but it's not.
Back to your talent
okay,
bash.
so
Yeah.
if like it basically removes our diseases and gives us runes back, so you can clip your diseases. So just before your diseases fall off, you can use it and get you get a free a holy pair or a frost and holy pair for Death Strike, which is great on paper. But right now we're so global cooldown capped with our resources, you can't really make it's just too many global cooldowns. 'Cause you have to use Plague Leech, then you have to spend it. It's just it's a damage loss to use it, even though you're getting 2 free runes out of it. It's just because the global cooldown sticks to use. So because you have to do that and then apply it again, depending on how fast you use it. But what I'm referring to is if you use that with the Outbreak Glyph, which basically removes or adds a cost to it, 30 RP cost to Outbreak, and removes the cooldown. So what that would allow you to do is use Plague Leech off of cooldown every 20 seconds or so to get a free rune pair. But again, because the global cooldowns it takes to do all that stuff, it makes it not worth it. So it has potential to be really good, but it isn't. So.
Huh. Yeah, it just seems like reading through it. When I learned about these classes to make these show notes, stuff like that, like the big frustration I had with rogues before, was that it just seems like there are some spells and abilities that are there for leveling in the early process, but then when you get to max level, you have so many things that do the same thing that, for your disease spreading at least, it's a big part of the class. But it felt like you just don't even care about it anymore because it's so easy to get out of there and just like don't worry about it. So. Right. Yeah, I don't know. Ulti, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, what Ren said, like, Plague Leech until 5.4 it only gave you 1, so it was completely useless, and then they buffed it, but they also buffed Scent of Blood, so we got almost GCD capped. So, yeah, it's also pointless. I've had Roiling Blood for every fight ever. I don't think I've switched out of it.
Yeah, which I think, and that's a talent, right? I'm not mistaken. And that, we've brought up before the show, and then Anna can attest to it, is sometimes when there's a talent that is so mandatory, why is it not baseline, or why are the other talents not competitive enough that you have to choose between them?
Yeah, well, these guys talked a little earlier in the show about how some of their talent choices were not very interesting, and this may be the shining example of that sort of lack of interesting choices that you were talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a talent so mandatory, that you haven't switched out of it for the entire expansion, then yeah, that doesn't sound like a very interesting tier to me.
No, that does not at all. So the last thing about diseases, I think we added this last night, was bloodworms. Let's talk about bloodworms for a minute before we get into priorities and stats and stuff. So who wants to talk about bloodworms first? You guys both think they're great, right? They're super good.
The best.
They're amazing. I love them.
Best worms US.
They're really reliable as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But I can do it if you want. So basically what bloodworms are, basically they spawn from your auto attacks, and they hit the boss, they then explode and heal people around you. However, you can't control the explosion, and they also, most of the time, they overheal because everyone's topped most of the time. So they're really bad. They're just RNG and they're crap. They can't be relied upon as a cooldown because you can't control them. And if you can't rely on it, then you can't even factor it into anything. So even when they do work, the healers are just the healers are going to overheal. So they do nothing basically. They can save lives. Like in the Annihilate room on Garrosh Heroic, sometimes if someone hasn't got a buff, then they drop low. Your bloodworm might explode, it might not. But if it does, then it can top them. It can save their life. But it's so RNG that, yeah.
Yeah, Anna knows what it feels like to have that extra splash healing in the raid. We've never had a Blood DK tanking, so we don't have those. So I don't know if a raid feels more or less stable if you do or don't have them.
Can't say that I've noticed them.
Yeah, see?
Yeah. I mean, like, I've seen them on my combat text. Like, I see my incoming heals, and I'll be like, oh, sure, it just healed me. What happened there?
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, in terms of splash healing, like, there are lots of other sources of splash healing in the raid. It's not like bloodworms make a very big impression on me when you have everything ever in the universe splash healing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
Or-
it's what Trekkie said is that it's better than nothing. Like they're not great, but they're better than nothing.
Sure.
Oh,
I don't know. They're pretty close to nothing. I mean,
they're pretty close.
like I was typing in chat just a second ago. I mean, even if they proc, like let's use an actual example. So Annihilate on Heroic Rush, it kind of hits hard. So you need to be healing everyone up before each Annihilate. A Bloodworm proc, like the healers know what they need to do to top everyone off between the Annihilate. I mean, we do hundreds of pulls before the progression is over. So they know what they need to do to top everyone off between each Annihilate. A Bloodworm going off randomly is just going to lead to healing overheal. Even if it gets the heal in before everyone's topped off, it's just going to mean that they overheal unless they stop what they're doing. Which they, depending on what they're actually doing, it may not be, if they put down a trank or something, it's not going to stop. Like, it's just leading to overheal in other places. So the actual effective healing even is usually wasted. It's just completely, I mean, they could make it work. They could make the current system work if they either made it controlled, or using the same system of RNG, make it so it procs a lot more often and procs for a lot less. They buffed the amount that they healed in Tier 14, which does nothing because they're already overhealing. So their answer to that was buff the size. I don't understand that. But if they nerfed the size to oblivion and made it more like Battle Healer was with the glyph back in Tier 14, where it was constant, small, frequent procs of this healing thing on the raid, that would be a lot different and something you could rely on in a raid. But as far as my raid's concerned, bloodworms don't exist. They just, if it procs, yay, but you're not going to rely on that in terms of what we need to do to get through this phase, this phase's damage.
And I think like the healer argument in that regard too is that, like, I mean, before Battle Healer was nerfed, it was amazing, right? Because
there was a reason it was nerfed.
Well,
though.
yeah, exactly. But then if you have all your competent healers doing what they're supposed to be doing, then a lot of that extra triage healing really does not matter at all. So you kind of can devalue a lot of that smart healing stuff. But then yours have been like that all the time. So that's what the argument here is, that they really don't do anything because they're so random, and they can either be like a saving grace or millions of overhealing for nothing. So, yeah, that's the issue here.
Well, let's move right along to stat priorities for tanks. So apparently stamina and mastery are your bread and butter. Both of those doing lots for your outgoing DPS, I know. So what's... Can you explain why it is that Blood DK's gear that way, and maybe talk about any shifts that you've done recently to sort of play with your setups?
Yeah. The reason stamina is kind of our go-to stat is because, like we were saying earlier, we're the only class that has to take the damage before we can get it back. We're the reactive class for most of physical damage, like just regular boss swings. So we need to be able to take the damage before we can do anything about it. So what stamina does is it increases the... If a hit would normally hit you for 40% of your health, you increase the stamina to make that hit for a little bit less than. So it's making so each burst, no matter how big it is slightly smaller, so that you can... so you just deal with the burst differently. It changes the damage flow in that way. It slightly compresses every single burst, so it makes more bursts that you would otherwise not have had to, or have had to death strike, make it more into a gray area. It gives you more cushion, I guess. It's kind of hard to explain, but like... The cushion example is a good one. Like, it just gives you enough cushion so you can deal with the damage that you get taken without being too unstable. The mastery is it works. It doesn't work quite as well as stamina, in that it doesn't directly work well with our death strikes. The reason it works is because the more it's the best at reducing full hits out of the secondary stats. After you death strike, you get a shield, and that shield is based on mastery. And that mastery for us is the best way to increase that shield long enough that we have more completely removed, or we remove more full hits. And by a full hit, I mean a hit that is not mitigated in any way, cooldown, shield, blood shield, anything. So a full hit from the boss, we want to minimize those, and mastery is the best for that because it makes your shield last longer after each death strike. Haste does not work quite as well because the amount of haste you get, like shortening, because it brings the death strike that much closer, but it doesn't do it as well as mastery does by increasing the shield length toward that next death strike, which is why haste is not very good. Avoidance does actually work very well if you time death strike around it, because again, when you're reacting with death strike, an avoidance can be worked with. People like to say that RNG makes it unusable, but if you dodge an attack, you don't have to react to that attack. As long as you're holding your death strikes, dodges can work well with death strike timing. It still doesn't do it quite as well as mastery, But leading into the next topic is what avoidance does do is it gives us damage. You mentioned that stamina and mastery both give us great damage as a sarcastic comment, but you're right. They don't give us anything for damage, at least not yet, in the current state of the game. Whereas avoidance does. And like I just said, if you're timing death strikes well, avoidance can work well with death strike timing. Not as well as mastery, but it does work. And I did an avoidance build for a slight stam with mostly avoidance build for the entire progression this tier. And there's some hard hitters. There's hard hitters. You know, Garrosh hits you for 67% of your health in phase 4. So he hits hard, but it was manageable with avoidance. So like it's viable. It's good for survival. Not as good, but good. And it gives you the damage we need. It wasn't enough to make it in line with the other tank classes in terms of damage output, but it was enough to make it close. Close enough. I mean, maybe not for World 1, but for World 16 it was. So that's kind of like the options you have for gearing right now as a Blood DK. So are you going to do a mastery, stamina-based avoidance or build versus an avoidance one? And it just has to do with what's, you know, if you're newer, if you need more survival, what your healers are like, and what kind of damage output your raid needs. So those are kind of the factors that go into that. Think of it like a sliding scale. The more you slide the scale to the left, the more avoidance you get, and the more you go to the right, the more survival you get, or the mastery and stamina you get. And there's no like caps anywhere along this line other than the point where you can't get any more of either stat. So it's completely linear. You can go slightly avoidance with a little bit of mastery and stam mixed in, and then as you get better or as your raid gets more gear, you can increase that more and more to the damage size. So you can slowly get to the point where you're doing that hybrid level of stat gearing that you want. Like there's people will say like how much is too much, and there is no too much. You can go all the way to one, all the way to the right. It's whatever works for you, and because it's all linear, you can put that slider anywhere on the field. So we have a lot of options in that regard, which is nice.
Yeah, you just got to find a personal balance. I mean, and it really depends on what content you're doing as well. I mean, you can do anything on any content, but I mean, I went full mastery for the whole of progression just because the increase in DPS, I didn't really feel that it was that needed, and yeah, we managed to do it. The healers loved me for it as well.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting to see that because that at least sounds sort of dynamic in that regard, that you can change up the way that you gear and gem. At least right now, might really become incredibly simplistic and baseline depending on how 6.0 gearing really does work, outside of like the new secondaries and tertiary stats, of course. But I know like for Prod Paladin, you just basically just stack haste forever until you get to a certain plateau, right? And
yeah,
then,
I mean, well, back when progression was a really big deal at the beginning, earlier in the expansion, there was a pretty good argument to be made for stamina as well. But no, now it's just haste.
Yeah.
I mean, really the issue that I'm hearing is it sounds like you guys have choices with regard to how you gear, but none of those choices are offensive as well.
Is that...
Well, the avoidance
I guess avoidance is riposte now.
Avoidance is the exception, and that's kind of the hot fix. They gave it to Warriors too because we were both on the bottom because of that fact that we didn't have any, optimal survival strategies for gearing that gave us damage, and so they gave us avoidance as kind of a hybrid, and it works well. And a lot of DK tanks, like myself included, used avoidance this tier because of that fact. It did finally give us a chance to put up some damage in the field from our stats, as well as still maintaining a good amount of survivability. The stat difference between clan classes is one of the bigger reasons we have problems in terms of damage output. Like right now I'm using a crit build because it's farm and whatever, and it's boring. We've been doing it for 5 months.
Yeah.
But if you look at between when we get even vengeance and we get an even split of vengeance, obviously if we're using a cheese strat where one tank gets a bunch of vengeance, that tank's going to be on top. But when you do split out the damage pretty evenly, me and my monk, our monk, are pretty close right now, and that's because I'm using a full crit build. So I'm using a similar gearing strategy that he would as a monk. So that's kind of the point, is we don't have those secondary stat options for max DPS. We have the hybrid option in avoidance, which is better than nothing, a lot better than it was in 5.2. But before that, we had absolutely nothing. We had haste, which was not as good as crit for damage, and it did not do nearly as much as for DS timing as avoidance does, even. Because if you think about avoidance, it's all about reducing those bursts, and removing those bursts randomly with avoidance is still preferable to slightly increasing or slightly decreasing the time between death strikes, because that's really, if you're DS timing correctly, that really doesn't help a whole lot to shape incoming damage. whereas avoidance can if you work with it. A haste just doesn't give you that option. So that's kind of why it wasn't a great hybrid stat before, and we needed avoidance. All right.
Yeah, I don't. It's interesting, but like, because prot warriors can gem DPS stats to be fine, so can prot paladins, so can monks. They have to, and then druids just get so much from agility, but you guys just can't. It seems so. Hopefully that really gets figured out for 6.0 when all the tanks and the new vengeance changes and the new gearing changes can really help figure that out. And if they're going,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just saying, hopefully that brings them in line a little closer together.
Yeah, I was wondering if you guys anticipated any major changes in that direction for 6.0 with regard to the way that blood tanks work? Or do you think they're just going to go with riposte and hope it works?
I think they're getting rid of riposte. That's a band-aid fix. I think they're going to give us crit. They're going to give us the survival benefit to our crit. And I think they mentioned, I don't know if it's for sure, I thought in the back of my head that they had mentioned that they're giving us a damage benefit for mastery. I don't know for a fact. But I'm pretty confident they're giving us crit survival, something or other. We don't know what yet. We're like everyone, we're still waiting on the info dump. But
of course,
they're giving us something along the lines of survival for crit. So it could be that could be our next hybrid stat.
I see.
So they are looking at that for moving forward. So this is something they recognize and are trying to fix moving forward. So hopefully it'll be a null issue next year.
Well, let me bring up. Yeah, hopefully. Let me bring up a little bit about your utility first. Now, just to make sure our chat room knows, we're going to really break down Death Knight utility when we talk about Blood and Frost and Unholy Death Knights, to break down all the different stuff that they do that is classified as their utility. The U word. Anna, you love that word, right?
Mm-hmm. I do. And for DKs, it means gore fiends. Let's be honest.
Yeah, pretty much. So then how does that really impact as a Blood DK? Do you have gore fiends? And is that... do you ever take AMZ? How are those both?
I use Gore Fiends a lot. I haven't spec'd out of it the entire tier. I mean, I'm the grip for the ads for the Iron Star on Garage, as well as one of the grips for Mines is obviously really helpful. So it is a lot of utility. The problem with it, and comparing it with other tanks' utility, is that it's shared across the DPS. There's no reason not to give it to a tank, Gore Fiends, that is. Because they're equal. You can have a DPS or a tank do it. I mean, we both grip. Me and our other DPS DKs, we both grip throughout the tier. But the point is that they can grip. Whereas there's a lot of utility that the other tanks bring that we just can't compete with. That only they bring. Gift the Ox procs with monks. Ysera's gift with druids. Paladins can do crazy amount of healing utility. There's a lot of stuff that they can do that we just cannot match. I guess there's supposedly the Bloodworm equivalent, but our Bloodworms, as we discussed, are just not there. So
exactly, yep.
It just becomes a significant difference in utility. Yeah. They have mentioned, though, to be fair, they've mentioned that they are looking to tune down the amount of utility tanks bring. The other tanks, that is. I mean, I'd like to see them try to bring down the level of utility Blood DK brings, but they have mentioned that they're going to try to tone it down. It's the stuff like Rallying Cry, they might make that either give that all to all warriors, or make it so that or actually, is that to all warriors? I don't know my
Rallying Cry.
It is. Okay, I was going to say, I thought that sounded stupid.
Yeah, raid CDs are going to get tuned down. I'm just surprised to hear you sort of give Gore Fiends a little bit less strength than I felt that it has had.
Oh, it has a lot of strength, but it's situational strength. Whereas stuff like that, stuff I mentioned, with the exception of Rallying Cry, that stuff's present pretty much in every single fight. Like Ysera's gift of the Ox procs, those things are there every fight. That's constantly helping healing throughput. So anytime...
Oh no, we lose him? No, I hope not.
And you have healing...
Oh, there he's back. Okay.
They're back?
I think so.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
Sort of.
All right.
You're stop motioning, but it's okay. What? There it goes. Okay, we're good.
Saying is the other tanks have constant utility in the form of Ysera's gift and Gift the Ox procs. Those things are something that's going to be there every single fight. Yeah. Unless the healing is completely non-existent, like the healing requirement for a fight is completely negligible, those are going to help, at least a little bit. Whereas Gore Fiends, you have to have a fight with Gore Fiends, or you don't, or it doesn't give you any benefit. And because it's a shared talent with the DPS, you could do the same thing with another DPS DK if you have the ability. Yeah. And if you're talking about high-end guilds, the high-end guilds do have the ability to bring in enough DPS DKs to do it. if it needed to be that way. So that, like the argument that it's good. I mean, Garfiend's Grass is great, but it's not great for blood. It's great for decays as a whole, and I think that's the difference.
Yeah.
That's a good point too. You bring that up. Is like people have things that are there constantly, whereas your talent, if you don't need it, then you don't get anything from it. So,
Right.
And that makes sense. Yeah, definitely. Do you have anything else on your tank utility there, Ulti, before we move on, or are we good?
You mentioned AMZ. I mean, like, that's pretty useless as well. It's pretty crap.
God. You guys are both pretty adamant how crap it is, yeah?
But yeah, I mean, grip is great. I love it. That's really it. I mean,
Yeah?
DPS DKs can bring it, so why bring a blood almost?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
So, let's do level 60 talents. Or no, Anna, you do level 60 talents. I'll do 75. You do 60.
Death Pact, Death Siphon, and Conversion. So which one do you guys take? Is this any kind of an interesting choice for you at all, or is it another one of those boring tiers?
It could be an interesting choice if you're talking low resources, because Death Siphon has the potential to be pretty good damage per resource. But again, it goes back to the same thing with Plague Leech. We have we don't have any open GCDs right now, so it takes, that gives, lets you use one Death Rune, and 2 Death Siphons are more damage than 1 Death Strike. So if you're talking just pure damage output and damage per resource, it's better. But because it takes 2 global cooldowns to use it, you can't use it. So there's another thing where it could be good, but because of the nature of how you use it and the fact that it takes 2 global cooldowns to use, it becomes not a choice. Conversion is just awful.
Well, let's back that up real quick here. I was typing these up and I was reading through what Magdalena had on his post, and I think, I don't know if he speaks for the DK community as a whole, but yeah, conversion is just awful.
Yeah.
What does it do, Ulti? What's it do, real quick?
So it converts runic power into healing, so it's basically like a hot, but it can resources at the same time, so it's kind of rubbish in that sense. Also, the damage that kills a tank isn't the constant damage which is healed up by conversion. The damage that kills a tank is massive spike damage from a tank dies and then you're tanking 3 bosses at the same time. That's what kills you. So you need to Death Pact, a massive giant lay on hands heal. That's what you want. You don't want a crappy hot.
Yeah.
So it's really no choice. I've had Death Pact. I don't think I've switched out of it in MOP. So the whole X-Pack.
Yeah. And that's
It's always kind of sad when you hear about talent choices that you've just used for all of the expansion. I know everybody feels like they have some of those, and that just, it feels to me like it just doesn't live up to the vision of what talent trees were supposed to be like. I always envisioned talent trees as being like the kind of thing that you switch between encounters to make the next encounter better for you. And if you have that talent that you just never touch, that's really boring.
I don't even want to bring up the argument to make it like more attractive to Unholy or Frost, because why would they want to use up their runic power on a heal? Because they use that to do damage, and that's their whole point. So, and Death Pact is pretty much just like a free thing if you need it. It's a built-in health stone, more or less. And like you said about Death Siphon, is that the GCDs that you can't use on this thing that doesn't do more damage than the GCDs that you would use to use it aren't worth it. So, And then this brings us to our next question that came in to preface the level 75 talents. Came in from Prize again. It said, can you break down and explain the pros versus the cons versus the level 75 talents? Again, from US Ari Peak. Prize sent in a couple good questions. And these are Blood Tap, Runic Empowerment, and Runic Corruption. These are your rune regeneration talents. Now, when we brought this up in the pre-show, there was a bit of groaning. And why is that? We'll start with Ulti first. What's up with these?
Alright, so the one that's absolute crap in this tier is Runic Empowerment. So basically, when you Rune Strike, you have a chance to proc one of your inactive runes. But the problem with this is that, Death Strike is built around having 2 runes. So if you've only got 1, then you're sitting on that 1, and it's effectively useless until you proc another one. So it's just sitting there for quite a long time. So, yeah. The other one, Blood Tap, is great, and so is Runic Corruption. Runic Corruption, basically, you spam it, it procs, it gives you a speed increase on your rune regen. And, yeah, I mean, I go with that one. Blood Tap does affect the math behind it, gives you more Death Strikes, but it's pretty damn close that, you know, you can... This one is the one talent that we have choice in, really. I'm sure Ren has more to say.
Correct, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like you said, the difference between Rune of Corruption and Blood Tap are pretty close. You do get more Death Strikes per minute with Blood Tap, but it is an all-or-nothing thing. Rune of Corruption gives you small benefits, like, very frequently. And like I mentioned earlier, Death Strikes per minute, as a rule, just isn't very impactful on Death Strike timing and how well you can do it. If you're doing it correctly, Death Strike per minute is not a major factor. Provided you're doing it correctly. Obviously, if it's 0 Death Strikes per minute, that's a problem. But within the range of, like, using your runes and resources correctly, Death Strikes per minute is not a huge impact on survivability. So the difference in Death Strikes per minute between the two talents is not a major concern. The difference is, one of them, again, is small, frequent, but like not super beneficial, small procs versus an all-or-nothing Blood Tap. The only time where you pick one or the other is two situations. One does more damage, or two, you need the flexibility of Blood Tap for a given mechanic. Like we mentioned, stuff like building up Death Strike or Blood Shield for a hit like Execute. I know you mentioned that earlier. Like, this is why you'd use that. The ability to flexibly use your Death Strikes with Blood Tap allows you to get up that shield quicker in a short amount of global cooldowns than you would otherwise. Yeah. So that allows you to flexibly use them. So transition from a reactive way of using Death Strike to a proactive one for a big hit like that. So mechanically, there are reasons why you pick one over the other, but baseline, they're very equal. Again, the only difference being damage. And RC, Rune of Corruption, is more damage in a low resource situation because it gives slightly more blood runes and it has a slightly higher throughput, whereas Blood Tap gives more Death Strikes, so when global cooldowns are an issue like they are right now, the damage per execute is higher, so that becomes the more damage-doing ability. And Rune of Corruption or Runic Empowerment is never to be taken.
Never.
Is that? I mean, Runic Empowerment is burst runes. Is that good for PvP? I guess for like DPS DKs, I suppose.
I mean, go ahead.
I think it's used in. I think Frost used it maybe. Okay. I'm not 100% sure, but it is useful for the DPS DKs. For Blood, it's completely useless because one spare rune is just, you know, useless.
The reason Dual Frost used it, now I'm not a Dual Frost player, so I don't know this for a fact, but I'm pretty sure the reason they used it was because Dual Frost uses Howling Blast as their primary, like, damage dealing ability, and that costs 1 rune. So Runic Empowerment has the highest throughput, and you could actually spend that rune effectively, whereas sitting on a rune is bad because you don't get the rune return.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Yeah, no, I hope... I mean, because the rogue talents, I thought, gave him lots of options, and not a lot of the options were good ones, but it really seems like you guys have sung true that you don't really have a ton of choices for Blood. You kind of just have, like, you pick this or that, and you've had multiple options where you've picked up the entire expansion. So, I mean, we'll see if that can get a little love here. We're not going to talk about level 100 talents again. The chat doesn't freak out because they're not confirmed. Not all of them are even, like, real, I guess you should say.
We'll have time for that in the future.
Yeah, of course.
But we can talk a little bit more generally about your hopes for Warlords in 6.0. I know we've talked a bit about y'all's frustration with some of the things in your class, damage output, not very interesting talent choices, and some of the things that you like best about how DKs work. I know the devs have not released a whole lot of details about how the rework will go. They've made vague promises about, not promises, they've vaguely talked about their plans and how their visions for how they think that these classes will work. What do you see changing for DKs in 6.0? What would you really like to see, especially in terms of spells going away or the way your active mitigation works? So.
Well, there's so many that need to go away. Like, I mean,
too many excessive spells.
Well, yeah, they just serve very little purpose, or very little to no purpose. Like Control Undead, I've never used that spell. I think it's useful in challenge modes, but that's about it. And to be honest,
there was a cool picture I read the other day about a guy dueling those giant bone constructs in the bone waste outside of Icecrown. That's what it's for.
And
but.
Dark Sim, our spell copy, is useful like maybe one boss out of every tier. I mean, where it is useful, it is quite useful. Like, you can go down in Nourishen's room, spell copy his Bolt, Dancing Rune Weapon, and you can one-shot the massive construct inside, so you can get out almost immediately. Okay. But, I mean, if you want to reduce buttons, that's something that needs to go. They should make Roy in Blood baseline because
Magdalena wants it baseline. Damn it!
Everyone wants it baseline.
Yeah,
and then they can just remove Pestilence then. So, yeah. AMZ as well. That either needs to go, get a fix, and a major fix, because at the moment it is completely useless. It's 3 seconds. And you've got to be stacked for it. But where it is useful, most of the AoE is longer than 3 seconds. So you either need to couple it with something else, where an Aura Mastery is 6 seconds, which covers the full length of it, which is great because 20% over 6 seconds is fine. We're having 40 seconds and then getting hit by a truck for the last 3 is useless. So AMZ is crap. Personally, I think when they changed it, it was actual nerf, because where it was useful, it absorbs this amount, but does 70 or 90%. So where it was useful, it was amazing because it absorbed 70 or I can't remember if it was 70 or 90%. But where it was useful, like Li Shen, or I could even think Iron Star Explosions, it would absorb the entire thing, and you wouldn't have to use any other cooldown. But they nerfed it, in my opinion.
I mean, we still use it for Iron Star Explosions. There are times where the AoE damage is not periodic. I mean, when you look at Garrosh, you've got Iron Star Explosions and you have Whirling Corruption. And Whirling Corruption lasts for a while, and Iron Star Explosion is a one-time damage output thing. So we still use AMZ there, but I can see definitely where you would see that it's flawed compared to other raid cooldowns.
Yeah.
Doesn't it have a really long cooldown too? What's the cooldown on it, by the way?
2 minutes, I believe.
Oh, is it actually 2?
No,
I thought it was
it's
longer.
actually shorter. It's shorter than
2.
Devo and Power Word Barrier are 3-minute cooldowns, and AMZ's a 2-minute.
Maybe that's why it's so weak then, I suppose, because I've never ever had like AMZ is the only cooldown we're using. It's always like AMZ and a Devo and a bubble, or AMZ and all this other stuff on top of it. So.
But let's be honest. How many times have you used only one raid cooldown on any AoE raid damage?
Well, Devo
not a lot.
I think Devo was probably the only one that stands alone that could be used by itself, or like
you stack things
SLT.
most of the time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like the idea of a raid cooldown that is useful for like a single bit of burst damage, but it has to be better at mitigating that single hit than other cooldowns. I mean, I think that's the only way that it would work.
In 10-man, we don't need to use like 3 cooldowns. It is just 1 because we only have 1.
See? Oh, there you
Okay, well that's not going to be an issue with Warlords though.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. 20-man, of course, but that's a good point to bring that up. Yeah.
So Reniat, what do you think? What do you think will be changing for Warlords? What would you like?
The one thing that I want looking forward into 6.0 is actually something I don't want, and that is big changes to Deathstrike. We already mentioned the Vengeance change, and that's fine. But I'm saying what I don't want is to become a proactive active mitigation tank. We've mentioned how it has its problems, but in my opinion, this is obviously just an opinion, but the reactive style of death striking is one of the most engaging things that I found in this game. Once you go down the rabbit hole and look at all the different ways to death strike really, really well, and I enjoy having to work a bit harder with death strike to get to the same level of performance as other tanks. It's enjoyable to me. It makes it engaging. It makes the game fun. So it would really crush me if they made something like death strike. If they made it so that half your shield. It absorbs 50% of the incoming damage as opposed to 100%, so it makes the shield last longer. That would make Deathstrike into a spam fest, because then you could just spam it to get the overall coverage and removing full hits that way. So it would ruin the reactive playstyle. And I think it's going to be hard to fix a lot of our problems without changing that, but I think if they can do it, it'll make the class better as a whole, because we want to keep that what the core Death Knight playstyle is intact, because it's amazing. I love it.
Okay.
So.
That makes sense. So nothing really towards how, just to talk real quick before we go on the last little bit here, nothing about how your runic power and runes back and forth kind of mechanic works fine, you think? Nothing...
I think there are problems with it, but I think it's overall, it's okay. I mean, you get a slight damage increase if you spam Death Strike. That's one of the... As far as blood goes, that's the only real issue with that. And it's a very minimal gain overall. The burst gain, sure, but it also gives you flexibility. There's some times where you want to spam Death Strike to get the damage in. For example, automated shredders on Siegecrafter. So it gives you the flexibility, and then if you want to go back to this more survival-oriented playstyle, you just let your runes go back to the normal way you time, and then you have the ability again to then burst when you want it. So it gives flexibility, and there are issues with it. I think those issues matter more for damage dealing specs of blood or of DK.
Okay.
So for blood specifically, I don't think it's a super big problem.
Okay. And Ulti, anything on that? Are you good?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. Like, if they kept it exactly the same, I'd be perfectly happy with it.
All right. Fair enough.
Well, to finish up, I think that we'd like to give y'all a moment to sort of speak out to the Blood Death Knight community. Any parting words of wisdom that you want to give to your Blood DK brethren? You know, stay strong.
Fight
like
through
that.
it.
Fight through. Anything that you'd like to say that you think Blood DK should know to kind of close off your participation in the show here.
Don't do will tank.
Oh, don't do will tank. Okay.
No, I mean, like, the thing I want to say to the community is that we are fine. I mean, the damage output is a problem, but even that only matters at a very, very high level of content. The raid utility is a problem, but again, it only matters at a very, very high level of content. I'm in a world 16th guild for 25-man content, and there was no point at which having me on a different class would have improved our progression. So it's not like the end of the world. We're in a bad spot, but tank balance overall is still pretty good, a lot better than it has been in the past. So we're on the bottom of the barrel, but it's not the end of the world. If you clamor for too many buffs in too many ways, we might ruin something that's beautiful, and that is the reactive playstyle we have to play with. So hopefully damage will be fixed. That's an issue that obviously needs to be fixed. But don't keep the chin up.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when we talk about things on this show that are broken or not doing as well as they could be, because it's all a matter of scale. I mean, we have you in a very highly ranked guild, and all of us play in guilds that have completed all of the content, and 3 of the 4 of us play in guilds that use Blood DK tanks. So it's not like I don't want anybody who's just starting hard modes to be like, oh, I play a DK and I don't think that I can tank to the best of my ability for my guild. No, that's not the message of the show at all. You can do everything in the game right now.
Correct.
On a Blood DK. We're just sort of wishing for things to be better sometimes when we talk about things on the show that we wish could be fixed.
Mm-hmm. And then Ulti, what about you on the same thing?
I would say also Ren said we're the bottom of the barrel. I think Druids are the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah. There's room down there.
But I would honestly say don't be afraid of using cooldowns. Like, you've got hundreds of cooldowns, so literally if you're just using a Vamp Blood, when you're just taking mediocre damage, it's fine because it'll probably be up. As long as you've got something in reserve, that's fine. But yeah, don't be afraid of using cooldowns. That's about it, really.
Yeah, you guys have, if you're a dwarf master race, you have 7. So
yeah, Stone Form is OP. If you are tanking on Alliance, you must be a dwarf.
No,
I just wish
ours is a night elf. He likes the avoidance.
A night. Oh no!
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 The face palms. The face palms.
Master race.
Oh my goodness. All right, we're gonna get out of here for the main show here. Let's push the button time. Alrighty. Thank you guys very much for watching yet again. To go around the board, UltimateZeus from the Inner Sanctum, the first Death Knight in the world to blood tank and kill Heroic Garrosh. Thank you for being on the show, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
What'd you say?
On 10 man.
Oh, on 10 man. Yes, sorry.
10 man was harder. Shots fired.
Oh, there it is. There
That's
it
why we
is.
have a variety of people on the show. Lots of different opinions.
Yep. Mr. Reniat over here from Whatever We're Awesome, the first full caps locked guild to kill Heroic Garrosh. Oh my goodness! I didn't even say
It's both 10 and 25, if I'm not mistaken, for all caps.
Oh, for all caps? I don't know. We'll find it later.
That's correct.
That is correct.
Yes.
We'll go back around yet. So Reniat's on Twitter again at ReniatDK. Thank you for being on the show, sir. It was awesome.
Thank you for having me.
And then Ultimate, again, I forgot to actually say it, but you can go find out all about Inner Sanctum on isguild.eu, so you can see their mythic progression, because they were a 10-man guild that is now recruited doing 25s, farming 25s, and going to be mythic. So those of you that have all this, oh, Doom is me and stuff, you can go watch their progression and take a note from them on how they tackle the mythic jump from 10 to 25 and then back to 20. But then, of course, my lovely co-host, Anna's over on the Twitter as well, Anna.
On the Twitter,
And if you, again, does your Instagram link to your Twitter so people can see you on your ski trip next week?
It's Anafeel on both, and I always link every single one of my Instagram posts is on Twitter, so I'll link them all on Twitter.
Awesome. So hopefully we don't see you like face planting in the snow, but we can see a lot of awesome photos for next week.
Probably a lot of complaining and likely to be a fair bit of drinking involved.
Oh, well, okay.
Ski trip, yes. Sorry I won't be there next week, but you guys know that I would do my best. I mean, I did do the show from Honduras a couple weeks ago, but
yeah, I know.
I got plans this Sunday, so I can't do it. That's
fine. It's your first show miss since you've been here, but you can always find me over here. All my social stuff is BayTLM on Twitch. That's where you find me outside of the show. And I didn't mention it, but it's in the YouTube comments now, and people have been wondering what MoltenCoins are. Watching my live stream, Anna's live stream, and of course you get the most from watching the show, are for our giveaways in the future. The Firelord is our new bot for MoltenCoins. But again, we catch you guys next week, and it's going to be, because Anna's not here, I had to find someone to replace her. Just for one show. Just for one show. So next week I'm going to do a guest grab bag episode. I don't know what to call it. We're going to have on Ro from Realm Maintenance, Silver Latomi, who was on before with Nobble the Noble to talk about YouTube and stuff, and then of course, I think stand-in co-hosting, even though his beard will totally destroy mine, it's going to be Mr. Brutal of Static himself.
How are you having Brutal on the show again when I'm not here?
I know, it's terrible. That's terrible, but it's... see?
One of these days, Brutal and I are going to have to be on the show at the same time. Both on webcam, because I wasn't on webcam last time he was on.
Of course, yeah. We'll get it up there. I'm sure I'll tell you that you're angry at me again. That's fine. If he's here in chat, he might be laughing.
Come home and I'll be replaced. You'll be like, sorry, Anna. I'm going to do Brutal from now on.
Not at all. Not at all. Nope. Can't do it. But we'll see you guys here next week at 1 PST, 4 p.m. EST, and 10 CET. For the guest grab bag episode. Have a great one. If you're staying around for the after show for questions, we'll see you in a minute. But if not, have a great one. Have fun at work and have a good reset. Trust in the coin. And we'll see you next week, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.